my research is focused on the period between around 1770 and 1830, and I'm interested in the development of poetic criticism and the development of chemistry as disciplines by which people understand the world. I'm really interested in the ways in which science and chemistry and poetry get popularized during the period as well, the way in which they're disseminated to the public. And one of the things that the Royal Institution was really famous for, along with a number of other public institutions that developed during the period, was hosting these lecture series where active chemists, active scientists, but also just sort of these gentlemen scholars who knew things about various topics would go and lecture to an audience of non-specialists, right? One of the major figures in my dissertation is Humphrey Davy. Humphrey Davy is particularly important, I think, for me because of the fact that in his life he crosses this dotted line that I'm saying kind of exists between the poetic world and the chemical world. And Davy served as a kind of exemplary figure that said to me, the research that I want to do is really worth doing. I think it's William Godwin who said at one point that if Davy hadn't gone on to be a famous chemist, he would have been one of the greatest poets of the generation. You can see the way that Davy is attempting to craft a lecture that won't alienate his audience. And oftentimes the way that he does that is to draw in a poetic or a mythic metaphor. The first metaphor used to describe the chemical element was that it was like music, that the different elements were like notes in a symphony that kind of would all work together to create the natural world. And then Davy went back in, so there's an amended notation in the margins in his own hand, where he's clearly thought that metaphor wasn't good enough, it wasn't really communicating the point, so he goes back in and he describes the chemical element as being like the leaves of the Sibyl of Cumae, right? So the Sibyl supposedly wrote all of her prophecies on leaves and released them to the wind, and they blew across the world, and if you went and collected all of the leaves, then you could get a sense of what her prophecies were. And so Davy makes this comparison in order to point out the way in which the chemical element is always, you know, you're dealing with chlorine, so it's got a singular existence. You have just chlorine, but you can't really understand chlorine unless you understand the ways in which it's interacting with and reacting with all of these other elements, right? So in this way, Davy uses that metaphor of the Sibyl to draw attention to a particular aspect of that concept, the element, that his audience, I think, could really engage with and understand a lot better what it is that he's trying to communicate. I'm open to following all different kinds of trajectories in my research, but am committed to pursuing all different sorts of mechanisms for making it available to people, you know, to audiences that are very diverse audiences and have very different interests. So, thank you.